If you're using Python for more complicated scripts, or you're, more than one line, or just testing something out, or trying to have a good documentation of your script, I encourage you to use an IDE, or an interactive development environment. These are places where you can test your scripts, debug them, and have access to them outside of ArcMap. So the one IDE that comes with ArcMap is called IDLE, and you can search just for it in your program search bar, and it will launch the application. There are several different Python IDEs that you could be using, but I'm just going to stick with this one because it's downloaded and it's probably already on your computer already. The first thing you'll notice is that we pull up the shell, and here's where we'll get all of our output codes, and it will tell us if our codes are successful or not. So when you want to start a new Python script, you want to open a new file. So you'll go to File, New, and you'll see it looks pretty much the same, but this one on the right is where we'll do our scripting. The one on the left is where a lot of the outputs will be. They can get a little bit confusing because you can do things in the shell. So we can do simple print statements. Oops. And they will run. But if we want to test out our script, we should have our own window. So we can save it as okay, so we're saving it as that Python file. The next thing you would do in an IDE is start laying out your pseudocode or your comments. So we can have reminders of each step we'll need to code in, or how the order of all of our code. So it's sort of laying out a field map, or laying out the bubbles, the workflow diagram for your model before you actually do it. So we can title our code. We can add in a date if you wanted. Whatever else you wanted up here. And then we need to start our pseudocode. So the first one you always want to do is start setting your environments. Which we'll get to in a second. The other thing I like to do right at the top is call the commands for the ArcGIS window. So one of the things to remember about Python is that it is a universal. So since it is a universal scripting language, we could use this idle window for any code, any Python script that you wanted to. Since we want to use it for ArcMap, we have to, like I was saying, call in or import the ArcGIS tools and scripts and everything that goes with ArcGIS. So to do that, we do have to call it or import it. So you just have to type in import ArcPy. I like to do this at the start of every code. It just makes it a lot easier for me to remember to actually do it. So you can even add in a comment to remind yourself that. You can also, which is something I like to do through each individual step, is have print statements for each step, so you know if it ran correctly. So then we can save this and then run it. And when we run the module, we'll see on the left side of my screen, we'll start to see that we'll see the script starting, and then we'll eventually hopefully see the print statement imported ArcPy. Yep. So we can tell that we have successfully imported our ArcGIS tools because we're seeing the import ArcPy message here. So it wouldn't have, if something went wrong, the print would not have, you would not see that print statement, and you would see an error over here. So then, like I was saying, we can start drafting out our rest of our code. So set environments, which we'll get to in a second. We'll set our local variables. And then we'll get into the actual code. So thinking about my final example final project of finding the best place for a new airport location. And if you watch the other model builder videos, you'll see a little bit of this thought process, but we've already come up with a bunch of variables or criteria I need to include, but there's a lot of pre-processing that I need to do beforehand. So I want to break this up by variable type or criteria type, just so it's a little bit easier to see all the steps that I'm doing. So I'm going to start by having a section for environment variables. And then, so what are the steps I need to do? First, for data processing, I'll need to clip variables to San Diego County. Variables, is that spelled right? No. Need to clip, oh goodness, everything's spelled wrong. Just ignore that for now. Clip variables to, I'll then need to buffer variables, so I'm not building the airport right on top. And then I'm going to eventually need to convert vector data to raster data type. So in this, we sort of build out our little bit of our code, and then we can start adding in all the things into it. So we can add in our other thing that I recommend you doing is adding in that overwrite statement, which I'm going to be honest with you, I never remember. So I will go over to the internet, and which I always recommend you do. Go to the internet and just figure out what the answer is, or find that Python code. So for the overwrite, it's this one here, arcpy.environment overwrite output. We're going to switch that. So let's copy this. We do want it to say true, so we're going to edit this code a little bit, but it will give us just enough. So we're going to change this to true, because that will tell it to overwrite any of the outputs, so we wouldn't have to rename them every single time that any of the outputs we create within this code, I should say. And then we can have it print, what was that print statement? Print, okay. We can check to make sure we did it right by running this print statement. Save and run. You see it's starting over again, so we should see this comment imported ArcPy, and then we should see that there's no environment settings. Oh, because I asked for Workspace, so we want... Okay, so let's save and run this again. So that was telling us that we didn't have a Workspace saved, which is important because we can edit that too. And now we're seeing that it's the overwrite output is true, so we'll overwrite any existing files that we create within the code. We could set our we can set our workspace by just adding in this command. So this will set our workspace. Maybe set it above here. So this is where we're telling it to save all of our files. If you can see on the, if you can see on the code in the example, it has the quotations around it because it is a string. So let's say C, and you can start typing in your code, or you can always find, you can open up File Explorer. And if you just kind of click on this top area, you'll get, you just clicked in the file path to get the file path. I'm just copying it, and I'll paste it right here. And the only other thing I have to do is change the direction of my, well, you can either change the direction of your backslashes to forward slashes, or you can add in the double slash. And we have to add in the quotation. If you had a geodatabase, you would add it in here. And then we can have it print our workspace just to make sure we have it correct. So we should say imported ArcPy, true, and then this file path, if it does it correctly. All right, so far so good. Now that you have the basics set up for starting in an IDE, you could go ahead and start entering your variables and copying over your Python snips or just writing them from scratch. But overall, you'll generally start all your codes similarly to this, I would recommend.